The new Level Cap podcast is a show about fun, friends, game design, and all things otherwise. Your hosts are Marco DeSantos and Brad Telton of Level 99 Games. I'm Chris Solis, your producer, and without further ado, please enjoy the show.
Show me your moves on this new episode of the Level Cap podcast. As per the intro, it is a podcast about game design, family fun, friends, and F-Zero, and all things otherwise. I'm your host, Marco DeSantos, also known as The Mechanic Moves. And with me is my awesome co-host, Falcon of Level 99 Games himself,
Brad Talton. I'm the Pico to Marco's Captain Falcon.
Ah, yes. I have no idea about F-Zero lore outside of Captain Falcon.
F-Zero has deepest lore. You don't know the extended universe until you've collected all the spirits in Smash Bros.
Oh my god. So, number one, you're telling me to buy a Switch.
I am telling you to buy a Switch. The Switch is a good system. I wasn't completely sure. Like, I never really got fully on board with like the Wii and the Wii U, but I could say without reservation, the Switch is a good system.
Oh man. Great.
But
now I have to get it. Now I have to get it.
How are you doing, Marco?
I am doing fine. You know, this is very different for me and very different for you because now we've sort of like entered a twilight zone where it is actually a reasonable time for me to be awake and a reasonable time for you to be awake. So this is interesting. Maybe there's a new vigor in our voices that people can hear.
Yeah, absolutely. This is a new era almost.
Yeah. The era of reasonable work time.
Yeah, at least for me.
And for me, right? Because usually when we meet at 11 p.m. my time and then like 8 a.m. your time, which is like absurd, right?
Yeah.
So now we're here, we're awake, we're fun, and we're happy, Brad. And you know what I've been doing?
What's that?
It's recently I've been watching a lot of Smash Brothers. Ultimate specifically. And, you know, I've come to realize that there are a lot of characters here that seem to not be part of fighting games, but are now in a fighting game. So it's kind of weird. Like Duck Hunt seems like a very odd choice for a character, but they somehow adapt that character. And that kind of inspired this topic for this week, which is, Brad, can you read the topic for this week and introduce it in the most bombastic voice?
Our topic for this week, Marco, is Transmedia Adaptations.
Wait, it's adaptations?
Adaptations. Yeah.
Not adaptations. Huh.
Adaptations. What does it matter?
That's true. What matters is that...
I know exactly what you're talking about. You know exactly what I'm talking about.
That's true. This is why we're not one... In Level 99 games, pronunciation doesn't matter.
That's right.
Much. Yeah, so long as everybody understands and everybody gets the general idea. So, Brad, you're the expert of this, right? Like, I just realized that a lot of your games seem to be basically this, right?
We certainly are, I guess we'd say, like, we do, like, genre adaptations. Sure, yeah. Like, we've brought fighting games to the tabletop, but I don't think that that's truly transmedia, at least in the way that I understand it.
Mm-hmm.
So, what I would think of when I say... like a transmedia adaptation is you're taking something like an original property from one media and you're moving it into a new property in a way that stands alone. So you're creating a new brand or you're creating the same brand but in a new space.
I see. So like Smash Brothers in that sense, right?
Smash Brothers is, so like Smash Brothers is a new brand, is a new realm for, I would say, like the Mario characters and such. But for characters like Snake and Cloud, it's just a license. And that's it's sort of a difficult line, right? You have your licenses, which is just a character or something shows up in another place. This is like you've got Zelda Monopoly, or you've got your Lord of the Rings chess. Our own Noir Automata is a good example of this. Basically, any kind of product that is an imprint with different characters, or just an item without any kind of greater narrative or idea to it. When we talk about an adaptation, it's something it's pretty big. Like Marvel Cinematic Universe is a good example, right? Like they took these comic book characters and they translated them into, like, the entire comic book universe has been brought into a new media, the movies. Yeah. And it's been done in a similar way, but it stands alone as if you never read a Marvel comic, you could understand Marvel comics by watching the Marvel Cinematic Universe. People may argue that it's not so, not so clear cut, but you could go into these knowing nothing, and this could be your first Marvel encounter, and that'd be okay.
I mean, it's built to be accessible, right? That's the point of the Marvel Cinematic Universe.
Yeah, and so usually, like a true transmedia adaptation, you're going to be either retelling the origin story or bringing the original media to this new medium, or creating something that stands on its own. And often it even becomes a new brand. So, like Lego Harry Potter is a great example of these.
Oh, the Lego series, right?
Yeah, like all of the Lego brands they're not licenses; they actually are their own brands. So, like Lego Harry Potter is a different brand than Harry Potter. And
Lego in itself, right? It's not just regular Lego.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So these are all different brands, and they've taken this that used to be a book and brought it into Legos, a true adaptation to a new medium with everything that entails.
So so basically the difference here that we're talking about is that, for example, a game like BattleCon won't necessarily fit this definition because it's more of a we're trying to adapt.
We're trying to adapt the mechanics and the gameplay.
Yeah. Transmedia adaptations are about adapting the concepts or the IP. But I feel like both of it kind of blurs the lines, right?
That's true. And you could say that either one of these are technically transmedia adaptations. If you want to consider the mechanics as the defining point of the game, then a game that brings over the mechanics from video games to board games could be considered in this category. And so if you put it that way, then BattleCon and Exceed are truly adaptations of the fighting game genre or transmedia adaptations of fighting games from video games into board games. So yeah, you could say it that way. And I mean, definitions are, as long as we understand what we're talking about. Yeah, it's only as useful as what's included and not included. For the purpose of like what we're talking about today, I think that we really want to talk about the brand and not so much the mechanics.
Yeah, and if you want to argue about the definition, that's not very useful. But you know what? Please argue below if you want to argue our definition. But
post in the comments.
Yeah, it's just this is just a tool for us to talk about what we want to talk about, and ultimately we'll even get into that mechanical discussion as well, especially when you realize that transmedia adaptations can also work from video game to video game, right? Like, I think an example for here would be when you take one video game and it turns into something entirely different. An example would be, say, Mario RPG, Legend of the Seven Stars, I think. Is that what it's called?
Yeah, like the Mario RPG is a great example of a game that's like, it's a certain kind of game, and then they brought it into like truly a different medium, the storytelling medium of the JRPG, instead of action adventure medium and platformer.
Yeah.
So, but that game is a whole conversation in of itself.
It's such a good game. Oh my gosh. Especially that secret boss that you find in the town, and it just turns into a Final Fantasy fight.
When you get too excited about these kind of things, that's when you get Kingdom Hearts.
Yes, of course. But you have to understand that let's not talk about Kingdom Hearts. Kingdom Hearts is our new forbidden game, okay? Let's put an embargo on Kingdom Hearts.
Just 3 or all of it?
Oh my gosh. Maybe just 3 for now. Let's embargo 3. Because the rest we have to mention it for memes, right? Because we never mention the other forbidden game that starts with a D and ends with an S unless we actually use it as an example for something that's good. Kingdom Hearts we constantly ridicule, so I think that's okay to keep it as a meme.
Well, do you have any examples that you think are really great examples for these kind of adaptations, Marco?
Well, not necessarily great, but they are examples, right? So I think one example would be the Fallout board game. I'm not going to say that it's the best example. I'm not going to say it's the worst either. But they tried to adapt the entire experience of the Fallout game into a board game.
Yeah, it's not just a different game that has a Fallout logo on it, right? Like this is attempting to recreate the experience of Fallout in a new media.
Yeah. So I
think that's the key thing.
It's not Monopoly Fallout, right? Or it's not Cards Against Fallout or whatever, like, or Apples and Fallout.
Cards Against Fallout does sound great, though.
That would be pretty fun. Yeah. And anything else, Brad? So maybe outside of the gaming realm.
What do you say? Like the Sonic the Hedgehog comic book. It's one of my favorites. Archie Comics did a whole line of these, and Sonic's backstory was kind of a little bit shaky in the video games, but they really brought it to life in the comic books. And with the comic books, you can really see how the strength of that medium enhances the what the weakness of the video games, and that storytelling is not the strong point of the Sonic video games, but they really bring the storytelling to the forefront in the comic books, and but they still manage to capture the same fun of these things, right? And I think that's the important thing, is that if you're going to do a transmedia adaptation, you have to figure out what is distinctive about the original core property and where the fun of the original was, and make sure that you preserve those aspects when you move to the new medium.
Yes, and this is how you can fail it so easily, right? I feel like a lot of people who attempt transmedia adaptations often make the mistake of trying to just copy-paste the thing into the medium. This is most apparent for when you're trying to adapt video games into a different kind of video game, or a video game into a board game. It's when you try to just wholesale take mechanics from the video game and just like, oh, how can I just represent this using a bunch of components and cardboard pieces? Which I feel like is a misguided way to go about doing something like that. Because as far as we know, right, like if you try to implement a JRPG and one of the main mechanics of a JRPG is grinding, you don't want to force your players to play your board game for 4 hours just to be level 40 to fight a specific encounter. Like that's
exactly. That's not the strength of the tabletop medium. The strength of tabletop medium is that we can skip all that. I know you're gonna hate me, but I have to say it. Like the Dark Souls board game, right?
Oh, you did it.
Like dying and respawning and trying again is not the key mechanic. Is not what makes Dark Souls great. It's just a distinctive thing. This is really a game about exploration and the intuitiveness of the world,
which I feel like is lost in the board game, right? Like sadly,
to some extent. And I mean, all that does is it makes it more of a license and less of a true adaptation, which is fine for what it is. But you couldn't take if you're just doing a license, then it doesn't become anybody's, starting point, right? Like I couldn't start there. If I would have to know about the original property first. And I think that's a good litmus test, right? If I could enjoy this without knowing anything about the original property, then it's a good adaptation. But if I have to have source material to get in from the original to get into this new thing, then it feels more like just a licensed product.
I feel like that's it, right? I think it's all about the intent of the people who are making it. If you're making something, if you're basically making a thing and then slapping the license on top and just banking on it for the popularity of that license, then that's probably not you trying to adapt anything, right? Like it's all about the developer's intent. And this goes back to episode 1 where we talk about the purpose of your design, right? Is your design made to accommodate and try to deliver on the experience of the media, or are you just banking on the media to sell your board game, right?
And I don't want to throw shade. I enjoyed the Dark Souls board game, so don't get the wrong impression. There are some things that were preserved that I probably wouldn't have preserved. There's some things that cut that I wouldn't have cut, but overall, I think it does what it set out to do.
If there's anything I like about it, it's the combat. The combat in the Dark Souls board game for me was really good and really fun, and adapted the combat in Dark Souls in a way that I feel like captured the experience without having it necessarily be a 1:1.
Yeah. That's really the thing about these, right? You can never truly do 1:1, except in a few cases. It's very difficult to do 1:1 in an adaptation,
and oftentimes it's not recommended.
Yeah, and if you try to force that 1:1, and I think this is what you're saying earlier, if you try and force that 1:1 by copy pasting an element from the original into the adaptation, then it's just going to fail.
Like I often get this when people try to adapt characters into BattleCon. For example, some people have, people tend to make custom characters, and there's a custom character channel. And one thing that I realized, I'm not saying that like you shouldn't do this or that it's bad or that you suck for doing this, right? I'm just saying that like when people try to adapt characters into BattleCon, they often get too caught up in trying to 1:1 copy the character that the experience of using that character is completely lost, right? I think I've had some experiences where like there's a character in a fighting game or some other media that has like, for example, 5 kinds of bullets or whatever, right? And they did the entire mechanic around those 5 different kinds of bullets, but completely lose the fact that the character is supposed to be an easy to play character with ranged capabilities.
Yeah.
Like, and they don't.
Are you casting shade on my Rookyuk design?
No,
Marco?
no, but no,
my custom Rookyuk design.
Your custom character, Rookyuk Amberdeen. No. But that's just like an example,
but
right?
I understand what you're saying. Sometimes things are a little too literal.
The deal about it is that Rookyuk's okay because you set out to deliver that mobile ranger experience, right? And then the bullets are extra flavor on top. I'm talking about people who focus too much on the bullets and end up making a melee character instead, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
I see.
This is a pitfall in design that I see quite often, and it's that sometimes one-to-one copying things doesn't necessarily make your thing better, and doesn't necessarily mean that you're able to deliver the experience of that character or that media in a better way, right? Yeah,
No, I think that's a good assessment of it. Let's take a quick break, and we'll come back and we'll talk about one of our favorite examples, a true transmedia giant, right after the quick break.
It's time for Collusion. Millennium Blades Collusion is coming to Kickstarter this February. It features a new co-op mode and a storage solution for all things Millennium Blades. Check out the description for a preview link to the project.
Well, welcome back. Here we are again. And normally we would talk about the positives and the negatives of the Transmedia Adaptations. I think we touched on a little bit of that in the first section. So what I want to do in this section is actually look at a single property, a property that has been adapted to many kinds of media over many ages, both excellently and horribly. And Marco, why don't you tell me about the property that you think best fits this criteria that we have elected to talk about?
Totally didn't discuss. This is off the top of our heads, actually. We're so smart that we came up with this in the last 5 seconds while Brad was introducing with it.
During the break, we hashed this all out.
Yeah, absolutely. Brad, the media that we should probably be talking about, the IP that is so reviled and so loved is, wait for it, the Batman.
Batman, yes. Batman is a great property to talk about because it's been adapted so many times over such a long time into so many medias. Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of argument over which of these medias are good and which ones are bad. And it's actually, I think, gotten to the point where it's really hard to say what is the true Batman media. What's the original media for Batman, right?
Yeah.
It starts with comic books, but the Batman of comic books, is that the true Batman that we know today? It's tough to say.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, this is one of the examples I kind of was looking for earlier on. Because when you make a really good transmedia adaptation, the original source where you got the media from might be forgotten, and people might think the transmedia adaptation is the original source. You know what I mean?
Or might be changed even by like you said. I realized that, for example, the old Adam West Batman came before the Christian Bale Batman, but to me, I have to look at the Adam West, through the lens of Christian Bale because I saw that one first. So experiencing the modern media really filters the way you understand the old media.
Yeah.
So it becomes part of the entire identity of the property.
Which is why I feel it's quite unfortunate that a lot of people are introduced to Batman in the most popular Christopher Nolan movies, right?
Wait, I should have said Christopher Nolan. I said Christian Bale.
Oh, okay.
Did I? I should probably do my research.
Christian Bale is the Batman. Christopher Nolan is the director.
Okay, good. I thought I was getting that wrong. Yeah.
Yeah. No. You're all right. You're on level. But yeah. I feel like there's a certain thing that's lost, right? Because my first introduction to Batman and the Batman which I view all other Batmans through is the Justice League animated cartoon Batman, right?
Mm-hmm.
And he acts very much differently from the Batman in Christopher Nolan films because it's a cartoon compared to a gritty reality-rooted movie, right?
Yeah.
So, Batman in the Nolan films is no nonsense, talks with this voice all the time, right? And
that Batman becomes the basis for the Arkham series video games, which are probably my closest association with Batman.
Really?
So I've played through all of these. I love them.
You love them.
Some of my favorite video games of all time.
I think I really like these video games as well. It's just that I feel like they capture Batman very well. I think one of the reviews that I read, and one of the things that I experienced when playing them, is that when you play it, you feel like you're actually Batman.
Yeah, the immersion is complete, right?
Yeah, it's so good in that sense, right? Like, you feel like Batman, like you feel like you start thinking like Batman, you feel like you start acting like Batman, you make decisions like Batman.
Right. You know, your wife comes up and she's like, "Hey, hun, would you like a drink or something?" Like, "No, I have to fight crime.
I have to fight crime. My vigil never ends." But that's what I was talking about, right? Like, when you say think like Batman and your first reaction is to do deep, gruff voice and be edgy, that's what I feel like is lost, right? Because my first introduction to Batman was the cartoon, and he's nowhere near as edgy or gruff in that one, right?
But it's true, right? Because like each of these medias that we've seen is really playing off the strength of that media in the shared universe of Batman, right? It's always the same Batman. He's always Bruce Wayne. He's always, parents died in Crime Alley when he was a kid. He always has a butler named Alfred, et cetera, et cetera. Like, we know this character, but any of those entry points would be a great entry point. And the video game plays off the immersion of Batman. Like, you get to do all the activities that Batman does. You get the high-tech detective adventure. You get to interact with the immemorable characters. You get to do the fighting. You get all the gadgets. You get the stealth. And then in the movies, you have the spectacle of Batman. Like, he has all these huge special effects. It's got this dark, gritty sort of crime noir feel to it, but still with all the high-tech elements. So it really plays to that. And then in the animated series, you're really playing to sort of the novelty of Batman. You've got these characters who are quirky, and their quirks are really played up, and Batman is this monolithic character that kind of is able to take care of everything, and live this double life. You really get to explore the characterizations and how they develop over time. So there's a lot of... So each of these mediums is telling the same exact story, or about the same story, but using the strengths and the tools of their own media to do it.
And delivering a different experience each time that still somehow captures the essence of the media that they're trying to represent, right? When you look at these things, the games specifically, you don't look at an Arkham game and think to yourself, I could just change Batman with any other character and it would still be the same thing. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Right? Like, the Arkham games were built around making you feel like Batman. And like you said it yourself, right? The game is constructed in such a way that you see all the Batman characters, that the Batman characters' unique quirks play into the gameplay mechanics, right? Like the Scarecrow hallucinations. Like, that's a mechanic that's born from trying to give you the experience of fighting against Scarecrow. And ultimately, the video game was able to deliver on that in a way that the movies are not able to, because in the movies, you just see Batman get woozy, or they just show some filter on top, or maybe they show a scene of Batman in a Scarecrow nightmare dimension. But in the games, you have to fight a 50-foot tall Scarecrow yourself, right?
Yeah, you really do. You really do get scared, right? The fear is real. But I think it starts with the question of what would Batman be like in this media, and then fully realizing that, right? And that's the best adaptations have started with that.
Yeah, it goes back to our original point when we were talking about how you should implement it, right? Let me quote it again. What is important and or distinctive about the core property? Here's the kicker. Where is the fun of the original, right? What makes Batman engaging? What makes Batman fun? What makes Batman fun and engaging is, you said it yourself, right? The puzzle solving, the personality.
It's this kind of this universe that is, I guess the universe, the character, the sort of, black and white, clear cut, good and evil, hero, villain, but it gets deeper. I think that it's hard to say exactly what it all is, but I don't think that that's really relevant to the discussion. What it is that the same things that you love about Batman the Animated Series, you also love those same things about the video games, and you also love the same things about the movies.
Exactly.
And about the comic books, too.
Yeah, and ultimately the fact that like you can't necessarily point it out, but you know when a thing feels right. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like you know when a thing feels like a Batman thing. And you know when a thing is something Batman would reasonably do. And if the thing, or if the media trying to adapt Batman makes Batman do something that doesn't make him feel like Batman anymore, then they've failed, right? A good example of this is the latest Justice League movies, right? Where they have Batman come into a room with a bunch of gangsters and he uses an AK-47 to gun them all down. And people just felt inherently wrong about that because it's like, that's just not something Batman would do. And I think that kind of means...
It's not, not my Batman.
Yeah, hashtag not my Batman, right? I understand wanting to take the character in a new direction, right? Because now he's like some sort of like... He's jaded, right? That's essentially what he is. He's like ultra jaded.
He's once you have jaded Batman, you basically just have Punisher, I guess.
Yeah, I guess.
That's it. That character feels more like Punisher. But yeah, you're right. It's there are a lot of bad examples of bringing the character to a new medium.
Oh my gosh. Can I mention some of these? You mentioned how you love the Arkham games.
Yeah, let's talk about these.
Can I mention how much I hate the SNES Batman games, like the old school Batman adaptations where they were like, oh, how do we implement a Batman game? What's a popular genre right now? Side-scrolling platformers. All right, let's do a side-scrolling platformer game. And I'm like, why? This doesn't make you feel like Batman at all, right? So like, one of the games is essentially what is just Battletoads, but you're Batman. And it makes no sense because the entire thing is Batman walks into a room, no stealth whatsoever, isn't agile, doesn't do verticality, doesn't do fear, doesn't hide. He walks into a group of 5 enemies and does punch, punch, kick, and then they all die. It doesn't feel like Batman. And you failed on the experience of Batman. And it's such a bad experience. I'm so mad.
Yeah, so and that's where it starts to feel more like a license and less like an adaptation. Because we're not really giving you the Batman experience, right? We're delivering a different experience with a Batman skin on the top.
So ultimately, I think this is a point of discussion that I wanted to ask you about, Brad, right? Mm-hmm. Do bad adaptations just feel like licenses?
Yes, kind of. I mean, I think a good license feels like an homage.
Yes,
like an homage.
Definitely.
But a bad license just feels cheap. Like it feels like a cash-in. And I think that's the real difference, right? A bad adaptation or bad license, however you want to call it, is going to feel like that. And I think one thing that really makes the adaptations stand out is that the original material is respected, but also given freedom. And that's what you don't see in a lot of these licenses. Like, you get the rights to use a Batman character, so, we got to get it out in 5 months. We've got to, this is the engine we have. This is the gameplay we have. DC wants to make something that they know is going to sell, so we make the Batman beat-em-up game, ship it, it's done. There's no real soul in that. But with the Arkham games, they got the freedom to tell a story, to interpret the character, and to bring the universe to life in the media that they had mastered already, right?
Yes.
So you have this company that has really mastered their own media, and you have a licensor that's willing to give them the freedom to reinterpret the source material and to create something new. Then you get a true Transmedia adaptation. That's the gold standard that we should be looking for, is the Arkham Asylum series.
You know what? Another example that I want to put as my gold standard?
What's that?
Spider-Man 2, the video game on PS2. Have you ever played that?
I haven't. I heard the new Spider-Man is really good, but I haven't played the old one.
So the new Spider-Man is basically an Arkham game, but you're Spider-Man instead of Batman. So if that doesn't sell you on it, then I don't know.
That pretty much sells me on it.
Yeah. I mean, like, look, imagine if you're, like, how Batman is mobile in the Arkham games, where he, like, climbs up the tower and then he does the glide? Imagine instead of having to do that, you can web swing, and you can do mid-air Tony Hawk style tricks while web swinging.
That sounds great.
The best.
No, but that's a good thing, right? Because that's the kind of thing Spider-Man would do. Batman would never be caught dead doing a Tony Hawk style trick.
Exactly, but Spider-Man would. He's exactly that kind of character.
Yeah, and so choosing which mechanics, like not just taking your mechanics, but choosing your mechanics to fit the character and to fit the feel of the game. That's a big deal. But anyway, go on. You were
yeah,
on a different point.
I mean, like, this is all on the same point, right? Like, as much as you love the Arkham games, I love Spider-Man 2 and the new Spider-Man on PS4 for exactly the same reasons, because they deliver on the experience of Spider-Man. Spider-Man 2, like, is a movie license game, but it's more of an adaptation. Like, so Spider-Man 2 came out during the era of bad movie licenses, you know, where they just take an action adventure game and then they slap on Shrek on it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it came from that era. So when I got it, I wasn't expecting much, but holy heck, man. Like, if you've ever played Arkham, play Spider-Man 2 on the PS2 and you will basically see that it's the Arkham games before the Arkham games even came out.
Really? Okay. I'll have to go. I mean, I could probably pull out my PS2, but it's probably easier to just watch some videos on YouTube.
Yeah, watch some videos on YouTube. Like, it doesn't hold up well to current graphical standards and stuff, but like a lot of what makes Arkham good, and like a lot of the mechanics in Arkham actually came from that Spider-Man 2 game. So I feel like it's very, very interesting in that way. And I feel like Spider-Man 2 is the first example I can think of like them adapting a comic book character in such a way that highlights that comic book character's
that
everything.
Makes it feel like you're playing a comic book story.
Yeah, and makes you feel like you're the character, right? I mean, Spider-Man 2 is not based on the comic book, right? It's based on the Tobey Maguire movie.
Yeah.
Yeah, but
which is based on the comic book. So
I guess.
You know.
Yeah.
I guess, but that's the thing, right? If the movie is a good adaptation, I feel like the Tobey Maguire movies were a pretty good adaptation of Spider-Man.
I think so too.
It can form the basis of another adaptation, and that's not a problem. Because it becomes part of the core identity of the property.
Yeah, I mean, like, Spider-Man's also... I mean, like, I guess keeping with our theme of superheroes, right? Like, Spider-Man is a great example of transmedia property as well, right? He's been adapted so well into so many movies, so many comics, and so many games. He's been adapted poorly as well. Note, poor adaptations also include side-scrolling beat-em-up games that are like Battletoads.
Yeah.
I hate it so much. But yeah, like, ultimately, that's the thing, right? And it's about delivering on that experience and trying not to copy paste. Like, copy paste mentality is not really good, right? Like copy paste in terms of trying to just wholesale copy mechanics from the character and trying to force them into your game, but also copy paste in that, you know, licensed games that are bad are just X game with a copy pasted skin on top, and that's not good either.
Yeah, you're really forcing the square peg into the round hole.
Yeah,
in that sense. Yeah,
square peg into round hole, or in my opinion, it's you don't give the property respect. You know what I mean? Like, the respect it deserves.
Or the property didn't give you respect. Like, that's another side of it, right?
Yeah,
because sometimes you don't have the freedom to do things, and you just have to work within the confines of the license you're given. And that's when games really feel like licenses.
Yeah, and when they're forced to be, right? Because as much as as designers, I think, you and me, whenever we're given a license, we always want to adapt, right? We never just want to like oftentimes...
Well, it depends. I wouldn't say that. I think licenses have a place.
Oh, of course.
Right? Licenses have a place, and it's that place, and it's that homage, right? It's where, like, I like Choose Your Own Adventure books, and I like Mario, so I want a Mario Choose Your Own Adventure book, right? And I'm the target audience for that. But a true adaptation is for people who like either Choose Your Own Adventure books or Mario. And either of those two people can discover the other thing. And I think that's what will make these really great.
I think that's a very important definition, right? The difference between the and the or. And I feel like that's very useful for this discussion. And as much as I would like to keep talking about this, and as much as I'd like to keep ranting about how good the new Spider-Man game is, Brad, get it. Brad, please get it.
All right. I'm going to go to Amazon. I'm going to get it right after this.
Oh, heck yes. All right. As much as I would have to do that, I think we have to end this episode. And I feel like let's adapt an ending.
All right.
Okay.
Let's adapt an ending from something else.
Let's adapt, or let's pay an homage, or just license. Can we license?
Let's license an ending. All right.
Yes. All right.
Cool.
Okay. Brad, can you give me the liberty, the freedom, the creative freedom to do this?
Sure. What ending you gonna license?
Okay.
Here.
Brad. It has been me, your host, Marco DeSantos, also known as the Batman, and with me has been
your co-host, Brad Talton.
Brad. Initiate. Badcast Paul.
Are you sure, Master Marco?
Yes.
Podcast fall initiated. Godspeed, sir.
The New Level Cap podcast is produced by Level 99 Games. Join us next Wednesday for more design talk and shenanigans. This has been Chris Solis, and thank you for listening.